Hello and welcome to the inaugural edition of MNI TV. I'm Heather Scott, I'm MNI's Washington Bureau Chief, and with me is John Shaw, MNI's Senior Congressional Correspondent, who's here to explain the fiscal cliff. So John, I thought maybe we could start off just explaining what is the fiscal cliff and what are the components.
The fiscal cliff pertains to the convergence of three big fiscal events at the end of this year. The first is the expiration of the Bush-era tax cuts, a huge event. Second is the implementation of across-the-board spending cuts of about $110 billion. And then third, later in the year, more likely early next year, is the need to increase the debt ceiling. I might say in terms of the tax cut component or the tax increase component, we're talking about $500 billion out of a tax base. This year, the federal government will take in $2.3 trillion in taxes. So a $500 billion tax increase in 1 year is a huge contractionary element, and is one of the reasons that the Congress and the White House are so focused on this.
Right, because they're concerned about the impact of the fiscal contraction on the economy.
Right. I mean, everyone has been for years talking about the need to cut the deficit, and this would be one of the largest deficit reduction packages in the history of the country, but it would be done in such a large and immediate and draconian way, coming on an economy that is fragile and is just beginning to recover. So I think people believe that that the deficit reduction impulse is a good one, but it's so abrupt, so large, that it doesn't really, that it would do more damage to the economy than help it.
Because it could actually tip the economy back into recession.
Right, as the Congressional Budget Office and other research groups have said that this type of fiscal contraction would likely push the economy into a recession.
Right. So we just had the election. President Obama was reelected. How did that change the dynamics?
I think it changed it some. I think that the president comes into this negotiation stronger than he was last year. Last year's negotiation was effectively foisted on him by Republicans because there was a need for a debt ceiling increase, and they demanded deep spending cuts, and that led to a broader negotiation. I think now with the expiration of the tax cuts, which is very important to Republicans, the deep spending cuts that are coming, half of which would come from defense, it seems to me that it's a more balanced negotiation. The president is coming off a re-election, although the public also re-elected a Republican majority in the House and left the Senate relatively closely divided. So I think both parties are coming into this negotiation with things that they can point to. But I think the general vibe is a positive one. I mean, in the last week, the president has sent conciliatory messages. The House Speaker came right out of the box and talked about needing to bring new revenues into the equation, which is something Republicans have been cautious about. The Senate Majority Leader said, I think we can get an agreement. The one kind of discordant note is the Senate Minority Leader, Mitch McConnell, who arguably lost the most in this election. The Republicans were expected to make big inroads in the Senate. They didn't at all. He's been much more abrupt and has sort of said, okay, President Obama, show us your plan. Put the impetus on the president to move this negotiation forward.
So we're in a lame duck session of Congress. The fiscal cliff is coming. What's the state of play, the sort of most likely scenario now?
Well, they begin formal talks on Friday. The president is going to be hosting congressional leaders, and it's interesting that he began this week by meeting first with labor leaders, and then, in case the business community didn't realize that they're next, they will be talking to him on Wednesday, and then he'll be meeting with congressional leaders on Friday. Again, Obama is being careful. There's congressional elections this week, so I think part of it was a deference to let these congressional elections play out. So the first talks begin on Friday. I think probably the best that could come out of these would be to put together a process by which intense negotiations begin. It's very, very difficult to have a productive negotiation when you have 25 or 30 people in the room. So I think what will be interesting to look for if they put together a process in which they have perhaps the Treasury Secretary, the Senate and House tax chiefs, a couple liaisons to the leadership, a real small working group to begin these negotiations. But I think my general sense is that while there is huge urgency and the markets are very unsettled, I still think the political dynamic is dicey enough that this negotiation is going to go on for some weeks. I mean, I think that it could go well into the deep part of December, and and as both parties try to see what they can get. And I think both leaders, Obama and the Speaker, who I think will be the most critical actors, have kind of a political impetus not to rush into agreement. They have to let their people know that they're fighting hard. So I think that this negotiation is going to be unsettling for some weeks, and you
think the politics might actually push it to sort of a 11th hour kind of?
Yeah, I think I'd be very surprised if it was solved before late December. And there is a scenario that it goes into early next year, in which, you know, again, we talk about the fiscal cliff. Others have said that the effects would not be immediately draconian. There's some things that the administration might be able to do administratively in terms of delaying the spending cuts and so forth. So this, I think the earliest would be a late December agreement, but it is very likely, it is possible, I would say, that it could extend into January.
Okay, well, this is a very complex issue, and we'll have you back another time to explain in more detail what's going on in the state of play as we move forward in these negotiations. Thanks for joining us and for that explanation. And again, this is MNI TV. John Shaw, the senior congressional correspondent for MNI, who also produces our periodic Fiscal Cliff Watch, which you can see on MNI's main wire. Thanks for joining us.